did not provide for enough space for the moderator. It's quite fine for me. I would just like to open our session. It will last for around 45 minutes, so I will ask my colleagues to be quite brief when giving their answers and comments. If we have time, we will ask our colleagues present in the audience whether they have questions. Maybe they would like to specify some things, but only if we have some spare time left. So it depends. And sorry if we finally don't have time. The subject is unmanned transport. There are proponents as well as opponents of this phenomenon. This is future that looks like distant future, but perhaps it will come earlier than expected by many. Or maybe not. There are some advantages as well as disadvantages of these technologies. So here we invited respected experts, people who have already some experience of working with autonomous vehicles. Some of governments, including the Moscow government, are on the verge of taking the respective decisions. And Sergei Sobyanin signed an agreement with KAMAZ Group, Gas Group, and Yandex, as well as the Automotive Transport Institute, the agreement on the development of autonomous vehicles in Moscow. So why Moscow? Why do we have this group of stakeholders? The goal of Moscow's mayor is for Moscow to be in the vanguard of all the solutions related to the unmanned vehicles. We are sure that in future we will have autonomous transport, and Yandex is one of the best IT companies, and KAMAZ and gas groups are among the largest producers of buses and public transport. The NAMI Institute, the Automotive Institute, is a competent body to make this future closer. Moscow wants to develop regulations so that these vehicles could drive our roads and streets. For example, we have to take into account which sensors should be installed on the streets that would help the autonomous vehicles or AVs to drive. And there are a number of other issues that we will have to develop together with the Ministry of Transport. So we took upon ourselves the role of a polygon on which we will test all the solutions before they come to our streets. I would like to introduce our distinguished speakers. Irek Gumerov, member of the board of KAMAZ Group. Tigran Kudaverdian, head of the Yandex Taxi project. Nikolaus Lang, from the BCG company. Bob Lutz, from Lutz Communications, former vice chairman of the General Motors company. We also have here Mr. Sorokin, chairman of the board of the Gas Group, and Olga Uskova, president of Cognitive Technologies. I would like to ask our colleagues to briefly speak about the technologies and the developments that they already have in the field of autonomous vehicles development. What are the challenges that you have faced? What are the interesting facts you know? What you would like to share? Then I will ask you some questions, and I hope that we will have enough time. So let us start with Iraq. Good afternoon. We have already shown some of our projects to our colleagues. We believe in the future of the autonomous vehicles, and we see that we can use the autonomous vehicles in some niche areas. We have developed a vehicle that can already be used in closed environments, for example, at factories, because there it's easier to resolve all the regulatory issues. We are also developing the unmanned trucks dump trucks that we can use already today. We can already use such a vehicle in closed environments. Together with the NAMI Institute, we are developing a shuttle project in Kazan, and it has already transported passengers without the driver on dedicated lanes. However, there we faced some regulatory issues. Speaking about the future, we do believe, of course, that it will represent a radical change in our world. It will change the attitude of humans to vehicles. But I would also like to highlight that there are a number of technologies involved in unmanned vehicles. For example, electric transmission and new technologies, digitalization in a broad sense of the word, the digital platform that is being introduced in our life. We are living in an interesting time, and we witness a merge of these technologies that will change the world. Regarding the general use, roads and streets, it will be a step-by-step process, and these issues are not technological ones. These are regulatory issues, and we think that by 2020 there will be technologies available to use the unmanned vehicles, but the regulatory issues will remain. Tigran, you have the floor. Good afternoon. I would like to speak about the successes of Yandex in terms of unmanned vehicles. We started the development in 2016, and this year we had 3 important events. The first one, in winter, for the first time, we tested the autonomous vehicle in snowy conditions right after a snowfall, and there is a video about that. The second event, in May, we had a conference for marketers close to VTB Arena, and on the territory of VTB Arena, we transported 700 persons. We allowed them to test the autonomous vehicle and to drive around the arena. And several days ago, a car drove 800 kilometers from Moscow to Kazan, and only 1% of the time it was driven by an engineer. It was due to heavy rain and to the fueling requirements. But still, it's a very important progress. We have a polygon, a testing ground on the outskirts of Moscow, where we are organizing various tests. And me personally, as well as my team, are deeply involved in that. The developers, the programmers, have the following theory. If you want to do something and don't know how to do that, and you believe that it's impossible, but if you see that your neighbor has done something similar, you start believing that your initial project is possible. And we know that our colleagues in America have made a significant progress. There are hundreds of vehicles driving in an autonomous way on the roads and streets of the United States. So it's a matter of several years. These technologies will allow autonomous vehicles to drive better than if they are driven by humans. So what's important is for them to drive better than humans. And this technology will be available in a couple of years already. Regarding the regulation issues, what's crucial today? The biggest issue today is tests. Registering and certifying at least one vehicle is quite complex. As of today, 5 vehicles are certified. Before the end of the year, we will certify yet another 5 vehicles. But it's a very complicated process, and we would like to streamline it. And that would already be a huge step. All the rest will come by itself. The technology will appear, everyone will believe in it, and we will be speaking about different things. Thank you, Tigran. Nikolaos, you have huge international practice and experience in autonomous vehicles as well. I know that you are taking part in various projects that are already underway in the whole world. You have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and to share with you a concrete experience we did over the last few years. Across several countries. So I brought with me the example of Boston, where we have been working over the last 5 years to get autonomous vehicles on the road. So there are a lot of prejudices about consultants. So there's one which I will follow, and there's another one which I will contradict. The one prejudice is that we cannot talk without slides. So I have a few slides with me. The other one is that we are not really only talking but not doing. And this one I will contradict, because actually we have been working very concretely with the city of Boston, the MIT, and 35 companies on getting autonomous vehicles on the road. So what have we done? If this click works, yes. What have we done? BCG has been working together with the City of Boston and the World Economic Forum on launching autonomous vehicles on the City of Boston. And we have heard that there are a lot of regulatory, technical, consumer elements that play an important role. And when you look at the logos you see on that page, you have a lot of different players. Usual suspects, such as General Motors, Renault, Nissan, Volkswagen. But you also have new players, such as Baidu, for example. You have insurance companies, you have telecommunication companies, you have mobility players such as Uber and Lyft, and you have other cities that have involved in getting autonomous vehicles on the road. Now, why is that so important? Why do we need a new way of mobility? Well, we talked to 7,500 end consumers. Now the click doesn't work, so maybe you can manually move ahead. We talked to 7,500 end consumers. And when you look at what they and the cities look for, they look for a dramatic change in mobility. This, what you see, is not only the skyline of Boston, but it is the wheel of benefits that Mayor Walsh had defined with autonomous electric mobility. And let me just point out two elements. On the top, you see improved road safety. Marty Walsh, whom you will see in the video, has a very clear vision: 0 fatality in downtown Boston by 2030. Autonomous driving will reduce the number of accidents by 96%. So for him and for the city of Boston, autonomous vehicles are one way to get to 0 fatalities. If you look at the bottom, and it's not by chance that Marty Walsh is a Democratic mayor, we talk about better accessibility. In fact, in Boston, and that is Marty Walsh's calculation, 16.5% of Bostonians are either too young, too old, too handicapped, or too poor to access mobility. And with autonomous vehicles, the purpose is to become more mobile. So essentially what we see in the future is that autonomous vehicles will reduce the number of accidents and will increase dramatically the access to mobility. Now, that's the perspective of the cities. Let's move on to the next slide and see how end consumers perceive their mobility of the future. This is a large-scale survey we have done with 7,500 end consumers in 3 cities: Boston, Berlin, and Shanghai. I don't want to go into the details, but what you see are 3 color codes. You see the clear green, which is the mass transport, so subway and commuter rail. You see the dark green, which is the passenger car. And you see the clear green on the bottom, which is mobility on demand. It's actually Yandex's businesses, in the business of Uber and Lyft and all the others, which is taxis, e-hailing, autonomous taxis, autonomous shuttles. We just discussed about this going forward. Now look what happens between now and 2030. Mobility on demand is jumping from single-digit numbers to 30–40% of all the trips. Imagine what that means. Boston, for example, has 2 million trips per day from A to B. So suddenly, 30% of these trips will be mobility on demand. And obviously, that happens. These are now 3 cities where we did the analysis. I'm very curious to see how the answer would be in Moscow. But I'm very sure we would be in a very similar pattern. So there is a clear demand of end consumers to go to that perspective. Now, the last perspective I want to show is you could tell me and say, well, Nicholas, if politicians want something, that's good, so 96% less accidents. If end consumers want 30–40% mobility on demand, it's also good. But how do you really make that happen? And that's why I would like to call the last slide I have here, which is what we have done between September 2016 and today in Boston. And again, the tribute goes not to BCG, it goes to everyone who was involved right from the beginning. Because actually what I found amazing is that it took only 4 months between September 2016 to January 2017 to get the first autonomous car on the road. And within the 12 months that followed, there were 3 pilots, Newtonomy, Optimus Ride, and Aptiv, that was driving ahead. So from our perspective, it was amazing how fast the city of Boston has driven that forward. Just maybe for the little anecdote, Newtonomy has been very clearly bought for $500 million by Delphi last year. So there's a commercial perspective with that. With that, I would lead in to the quick video to give you a concrete perspective of what we've done. Please.
Our collaboration with the Boston administration became key to understanding how autonomous vehicles will change the very concept of mobility in a modern town and city. And we are very happy by the experience of cooperation with both the city and BCG. Joint project with the World Economic Forum became a stunning opportunity for Boston. Over the last 12 months, we made a huge way, and without their support, it would have been impossible. This project allowed us to significantly accelerate the process of testing the unmanned vehicles, and in January, the first autonomous vehicles accessed the streets of our cities. It's stunning that only 1 year before that we did not have the cars, we did not have any regulations, and we even did not have any process of cooperation with the stakeholders, not just in the US, but all over the world. And today we have that all. Over 1 year, we achieved unprecedented success from the AV concept development to the full-fledged testing program. The cars ran for about 1,000 miles, and we could test the vehicles on the basis of Boston, and we also got the idea of how it is in terms of client experience. It is stunning, mesmerizing, amazing, and all the other synonyms of very good. We organized tests during the daytime. We experimented with complicated crossroads. We understood how to cooperate with the pedestrians and with other participants of traffic. We are happy that we had this opportunity to participate in the project of the mobility platform here in Boston together with the World Economic Forum and BCG. Thanks to this project, we could make all the rides in the city as comfortable as possible for everyone. We wanted not just to transfer people from public transport to individual vehicles, but rather develop a policy that would allow the AVs to become a natural addition to the public transport network in the city. For us, it was not just a project for Boston. We were interested in the very concept of organizing mobility in a modern city, how to build a mobility system in the city in such a way so that it is safe, environmentally friendly, as well as inclusive. Over the last 2 years, I went to 100 cities. I met mayors, representatives of administration and transport services. And the project that we implemented in Boston became a very important milestone for them. They want to understand how to build a mobility platform of the future in such a way so that it is sustainable and efficient.
Thank you, Nikolaus, for this detailed information and a very interesting movie. I would like Mr. Bob Lutz, given his great experience in the largest companies that produce cars, to share his impressions about these unmanned cars. So what do car manufacturers think about the future? What does General Motors or BMW think, BMW where you work? Because people like to drive cars. So what will happen if, after a while, cars will become autonomous and people will will they like it? Will they drive cars in a forest? And will robots handle all the cars on the roads? What will you think about this? Because this is a kind of cult of autonomous driving. What will people do? What do you think about it? Итак, что я думаю?
We really have no option because all of the major urban centers of the world are choking on traffic. And there's not only the loss of life, which was mentioned, but there is also what we sometimes forget, the loss of human productivity. In that, in many places of the world, people spend 2.5 hours per day in their automobile commuting into the city and out. If you could reduce that through robo-taxis, which are definitely going to come in every major city of the world, and in a not too distant future, the urban centers, within a periphery will be banned for private vehicles. So even if your vehicle is autonomous, you are not going to be allowed to take it into the city because of congestion. So if we can reduce everybody's commute time from 2.5 hours a day to, say, 1 hour, and then make that time productive to where you can either, some people will choose to sleep in the car, some people will choose to have the first drink of the day in the car, and it won't matter anymore because there won't be any such thing as drunk driving. Texting in the car will be safe. Some young people will engage in reproductive activity, which is also okay and without danger. But my point is, it gives everybody enormous amounts of time back. And that's what we really need to increase human productivity. And I'm sure that most people will continue to work. They'll do the reading or they'll be connected and they will continue to work. Now, what do the automobile companies think? Well, I can only really speak for one, and that's General Motors. And General Motors is embracing this 100% because GM knows that there is no alternative. We will have a transitional phase where the robo-taxis will be standardized vehicles and they'll operate in cities, and that will come first. And outside of the cities, we will still have human-driven cars, and we will have autonomous vehicles that can operate from city to city, such as the most completely autonomous vehicle you can buy today is the Cadillac CT6 with Super Cruise. And that vehicle can drive from New York to San Francisco without anybody ever touching the steering wheel, provided it stays on the interstates. So General Motors is certainly embracing it. One of the reasons why General Motors is getting rid of inefficient operations around the world is to amass a cash pile, because General Motors wants to be one of the companies that owns these big urban fleets, because that's where the money is going to be made. The money won't be made by buying cars and selling them to the fleets. The money will be made through the actual transportation use. And we will have in 2019, General Motors has already announced there will be a fleet of 400 Chevrolet Bolts in San Francisco operating without controls. That will be probably the world's first large robo-taxi fleet. Will be 400 General Motors vehicles in San Francisco. What nobody has mentioned here, and I'll mention it just briefly, is everybody thinks that autonomous vehicles are, we just have to develop better radars and better LiDARs and better TV and give the car all kinds of eyes and ears. That was the approach that was tried by Elon Musk with Tesla, and it doesn't work. The main component of an autonomous vehicle system is a system of highly precise digital maps, which have to be developed painfully, street by street, highway by highway. And these have a precision of 10 centimeters and are embedded in the car. so that the car always knows within 10 centimeters where it is and can basically go anywhere without its eyes and ears. And so that the eyes and ears, the radars, lidars, sonars, etc., will be only for obstacle detection. So the first thing that anybody has to do, whether it's a city or a region or a country, is go to the precision, make sure that we have the embedded precision maps. And with that, I'll end my contribution except by saying that the automobile as we know it, the BMWs, Mercedes, Ferraris, Maseratis, in 30 years, it's gone. And we will have only autonomous transportation pods in the cities. We will have different ones for going from city to city. And the private automobile will have the same fate as the horse did when we banned the horse from city streets. And now the horse lives a nice existence in horse parks and racetracks and riding stables, and that's the way it'll be with the cars. It'll be off-road in private locations.
Спасибо большое. Спасибо.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob. That's a very interesting forecast, a very interesting understanding of how the future is going to develop. And we'll probably talk about a person being at the steering wheel as a unique case, as an exception from the rule. And now I would like to ask one of the largest producers of buses and bus equipment in Russia. What do you think when, in your company, will you be able to produce such equipment? And when is it? The previous speaker said a certain forecast. Do you have the same forecast? When will the gas company will be able to launch an unmanned autonomous car? I can put the slides on the screen. I have a very short presentation and it will explain what gas is doing at this moment. For us, creating autonomous cars is an important program, but it's not only that. Given the role that the gas group is playing in the Russian industry, we have set the task of creating a technological elite that can develop this transport. We started working on unmanned vehicles back in 2008. We are financing a foundation which is called Volne Dela, and we also support and finance rubber crosses. We organized about 200 technical festivals and thousands of participants were invited. And 72 people from those festivals were already hired by us. Technologically, it's both a simple and a difficult task. On the one hand, you would think, let's install all the necessary equipment in this car, and the car will just determine its location in space while using or accepting certain signals through GLONASS. It will just know where to drive. But actually, the task is much more serious. We need to teach cars to communicate with each other and to talk via a certain algorithm in the program. Secondly, we need to modernize the entire car platform. And today I'm convinced that unmanned vehicles will be electric-driven vehicles. We have a huge number of prototypes of unmanned vehicles, those that we are testing at our company. This is the screen in the car which shows the road and the location of the car on the map in a city, in a country, and so on. But on the whole, the tasks are much more challenging given our particular climate zones or climate conditions in Russia. On the one hand, that's what you see on the left is what a person sees with their eyes and what cameras film in a car. And on the right, you can see what a computer sees. Determining the condition of the road, while very frequently there are no lines on the roads. And there's a lot of snow which covers these lines, and teaching a car how to evaluate the curbs, the side roads. That's the challenge for engineers and software programmers. That's what we are resolving today. Next page. Here you can see the images that are introduced in the memory of the car that allow the car to determine where it is and identify pedestrians, buildings, roads, and so on. I think it's about image recognition. That's what the entire car industry of the world is facing. You have to renew it all the time, given the changing environment. Answering your question, can we do this? Are we working on that or not? Of course, we are working on this. We have such cars and trucks. This is our car, which works on this principle every day. It follows a certain route from the United Engineering Center to the truck manufacturing center. It transports engineers and other specialists every day. And the task that we are resolving today is the integration of efforts. We need the systems of technical vision for cars. We are working on this together with the Yandex company. And the second factor is that today we don't have an element base in Russia for unmanned car equipment, including VIDARs, LIDARs, cameras, and so on. So technically, it's possible and it's not difficult to produce such a car, but right now we will have to create the necessary infrastructure. The agreement written by us today, also by our colleagues from KAMAZ, Yandex, from our company GAS, and most importantly the government of Moscow, we believe that this is the right approach to resolving this task. Because right now we have a customer which set certain requirements, and while fulfilling those requirements, we will be able to send those cars on the roads in the near future. If you are asking us whether we are ready to do this today, well, we will make this car tomorrow, or next year for you, but a special line will need to be dedicated. A 5G system will need to be created. You already bought electric cars, and so we need to determine together when we will put those cars on the roads. Thank you. So the forecast of Vadim Sorokin is next year, so we'll look at it. We'll order these cars. And I have a question to Olga and her company. Her company is working on neural network systems and machine learning. So today the manufacturers of cars such as GAZ, KAMAZ, and so on, as they produce cars, they install a lot of things there which make it easier for the driver to drive. This is an early warning system, a warning about dangerous sections of the roads. So what do you think? The transition from what we have today to unmanned driving, will it be evolutionary? Will it be done step by step when the computer will increase its capacities more and more? But we can't replace people at once. It's impossible to say only robots should drive on the Tverskaya street. So there will be a mixed traffic. So how do you think this is going to be developed? Thank you, Maxim. Thank you very much. Please put my slides on. Thank you for the opportunity to speak the last. It's the most convenient position. And before answering the questions, I would like to ask this room, raise your hands. Who will sit in an unmanned car now as a passenger? Who is ready to ride in an autonomous car? Well, that's cool. That's great. I was in New York just 2 weeks ago, and 15% of people raised their hands. In Korea, it was 30%. So this is the Russian character. Well, after such a football World Cup, nothing is surprising. Now going to the question that I was asked. After listening to everyone here, I'm glad to be here because I will have to dispel certain myths right now. And it's a bit strange that we are listening to those myths from our car manufacturers. Myth number one. You know, all over the world, the trend is that there should be a certain brain of a certain level in a car. As Mr. Lutz said, it's not the sensor, it's the software. And we are talking about artificial intelligence, which is already implemented in a huge number of car companies. Actually, those cars are sold here, and 3 manufacturers will have this mode of autonomous driving in a traffic jam in 2019. It will be fully autonomous, and we know this because we are selling those brains to them. We are producing the software, the brains. So there is one word that hasn't been mentioned, anthropomorphous model. The most recent developments say that the machine will repeat the role of the human, which is why we have those internal neuron systems. And those neuron systems are a revolution. That's a revolution for everyone, for people, for manufacturers, and those who are not doing neuron systems are lagging behind by 20 or 30 years. And those who will not keep up will not survive. So the key aspect everywhere is this preparation towards mixed traffic. And on the other hand, it's about declaring the level of autonomous. How smart is your car? How smart is the brain, the software that you buy? Usually, those are secret deals. I'm talking about the selling of those software programs. And now we are talking about the validation or certification. I like the German principles. The Germans have introduced 6 levels of smartness for the brain of a car. That wasn't fixed in the legal documents, and marketing guys started to announce the 4th or 5th or maybe 9th level of smartness because there was no system of limitations. But actually there are human losses behind it, and the key here is safety. In this safety, there is no notion of 97%, as I heard. There is no 98%. Safety is only about 100%. There can't be second quality safety. So this mechanism should be responsible to drive a person safe, or it's not ready for the real road, and we should not be training at the expense of living people.
So, could you please get back my presentation? Thank you. So we are producing brains. How do these brains work? They learn using video data. As a child, if you put a 3-year-old kid behind the wheel, will you trust this vehicle? But you can trust a 17-year-old who has started to do that. And if the driver is expert, you will be able to read a book or sleep a little bit. You will not be nervous sitting next to him and trying to control him. The same happens with the modern systems of driverless cars. Cognitive technologies became international sellers of these brains, not because we had money for international marketing, but because we worked with neural networks, and we and Mobileye became the leaders that produce really safe brains that show 100% level of safety. And now I am praying because I hope that in 2019 there will be 17 million safe cars entering into the market, and I bear criminal responsibility for what will be happening. There is this issue of criminal responsibility thanks to Audi, who was the first and followed by Volvo to announce that the producer of the truck will be responsible for accidents, and we, as the producer of the brain, so to say, will bear the final and ultimate responsibility. So we are now in negotiation with the city of Moscow. We believe that Moscow can play a role. We love to say that we are like New York or Paris or London, but here we will be better, faster and cooler than New York, Paris and London if we manage to implement this procedure. We can use the city as the basis to make a validation center for the technologists, for the service producers, for the vehicle producers, who will determine how smart and how ready this producer is to enter the streets and roads of the city. And that will be the first world practice of the systemic attitude of the city to its residents. And I have already given the example of Moscow, because Moscow is the first city who systemically realized the concept Moscow for humans, not for drivers. What irritates the drivers and what pleases to the pedestrians is the possibility to walk around the city on the streets, surrounded by beautiful environment, and the focus on public rather than private transport is in the trends on the international arena. New York says that our future is service. Cars are no more luxury, and cars are no more personal transport. Cars remain as a service of transport from point A to point B. And who read the book by Strugatsky brothers about carnivore things of the future? They predicted the future in that book. They predicted that there will be future in communism, but there will be self-driving roads. The person will wake up and use the road to drive from point A to point B. And what we are implementing is similar to that. That's what New York is adopting. That's what the whole world is adopting. For the car producers, that will be a great challenge. Who will the city choose? What brand will be ready to supply these brains and provide this service? That will be a big battle, and there will be a lot of victims, so to say, of that battle, and it will be about millions of dollars. So our next proposal is open for all the developers of neural networks in the world. That would be an open center of collecting video data of the Moscow roads and the possibility to use these video data to train their systems. The better they will train on the roads of Moscow, the smarter and safer we will feel on these roads. Thank you, Maxim. Thank you, Olga. Your speech has been quite interesting. Taking into account that we don't have much time left, I would like to ask a couple of questions. The autonomous vehicles are not for the sake of autonomous transport. It does not mean that our goal is to eliminate drivers. We don't have this goal. The city has the goal based on the following requirements. First, significantly improve the safety of traffic. And the second goal is to enhance the capacity of the existing road infrastructure. I would like to ask our experts and our colleagues to answer the following question. You are people who are deeply engaged in the process of developing autonomous vehicles. What do you think? What will be the effects in terms of these two goals in the upcoming years? What will be the results that we will achieve thanks to the introduction of autonomous vehicles? Irek, let us start with you. In percents, what will be the effect? I will start with parking. Parking in such amounts will not be necessary. There will be 70% less of parking lots because the existing parkings will be used more efficiently. Second, safety of traffic. It will be safer, but by 90%. Autonomous vehicles are more predictable than human drivers, so the risks will be lower. And we will also be motivated to reduce the number of risky road traffic participants. So I believe that we can enhance the safety by 90%. Regarding the capacity, the flux will be denser. The flows of vehicles will be denser because they will be closer to each other. Vehicles will be communicating between each other. So we believe that the capacity can be increased by 30%. Regarding the buses, they will be using separate lanes, and the efficiency will also be increased by dozens of percents. So the benefits will be shared by vehicles and people. People will have a lot of time to do something good and useful. So our residents will have a lot of opportunities that they lost before in traffic jams. So the way of life of our citizens will change. They will dedicate more time to cultural, leisure, and educational activities. And that actually raises the issue of what we will offer to our citizens in terms of these new activities for which they will have time. So the efficiency of transport use will also reduce the need in number of vehicles. That's an issue for the transport producers. Tigran, you have the floor. In terms of safety, I will agree that people will adopt unmanned vehicles only if the safety will be checked really seriously. So the figure of 90% is quite reasonable in that respect. It should be really much safer. Only in that case, autonomous vehicles will be adopted by cities and people. Regarding how it will change the life in the city, it's simple. Let's look at Moscow over the last 5 years. We shifted the focus on the public transport, and the city has changed. We started using the streets and roads in a different way. We started moving in a different way, and the autonomous vehicles represent the next stage of this transition that will allow people to use public transport more. Public transport will be personalized. Today, public transport does have some physical limitations. You need to walk to public transport. You have to wait, but in future it will be on demand. If you want to be alone in the car, you will be alone. So it will represent a huge breakthrough that will create new opportunities for the public transport. And it will decongest roads and streets already, and they have already become decongested, but it will be enhanced. Nikolaos, and apart from the question that I have already asked, I would like to ask the following. How do you think cars in property, will they be needed? Do you need to own a car? Or you can just think about asking a car to come and the car will come. So the first question, how the safety and capacity will be improved, and the second question, will you need to own a car or not?
So I think on the safety we discussed different numbers, whether it's 90, 92, 96, I won't dwell on this. I think it's north than 90%. That's at least the common view. On the capacity, I think there's a very interesting experiment we did. So our analytics team, Gamma and MIT, looked at how many more cars can I put on 1 mile of road if I make it 100% autonomous. And we calculated it, we came to 26.8%. So it's close to what Irek said, 30%. The drama is just that as soon as I put 1 or 10% traditional cars, this 26.8% drop to 15%. And if I go to 75% traditional car, it drops to 6.2%. So you actually need to make a big shift to autonomous cars to really have efficiency gains going forward. So that's something which I think is interesting. And on with regard to the ownership, I think, well, we have seen it. If 40% of the people want mobility on demand, the traditional ownership of a car is likely to fade away, at least for certain parts of the population. We will have mobility as a service, mobility on demand. Now you saw Marty Walsh on the video. He very clearly said he wants autonomous fleets, but he doesn't want to own them. He doesn't want to have them on his asset and on his balance sheet. So I think there will be completely new models where you as a city will buy service, will buy mobility, by the mile, by the kilometer, by the day, by the passenger, but it will change massively from a owner and asset-based logic to a service-based logic.
Спасибо большое, Николаус.
Thank you very much, Nikolaos. Bob, I would like to ask you the same questions. What about safety and capacity improvement? And what about car ownership? How do you think?
I think ultimately in an urban environment, there will be no car ownership. We already have the situation. What seems to be the problem?
Yes. Now it's working.
Okay. I think there will, in urban environments, in another 20 years, there will be no need to own a car, and people won't want to own a car. The efficiency will come from the fact that today's cars are owned, but they only are on the road less than 10% of the time. The rest of the time they take up space, either at home or in a city or in a parking garage. With the autonomous fleets, every vehicle will be utilized almost 100% of the time. It'll be handed off from user to user to user to user, and there is no waste. This business of human-driven cars blending with autonomous cars is going to be an unfortunate transitional phase, which, frankly, municipalities and states and federal governments are going to have to, at some point, pass laws and say, within this region, you must use an autonomous fleet vehicle. You cannot go in there with your personal car, whether it's autonomous or not, in order to make this possible. Because, as the previous speaker said, if you blend non-autonomous cars with autonomous cars, you lose a lot of the efficiency. And there is no question in my mind that human drivers are very imperfect. We have slow reaction times. We get to be distracted. We use phones. We do all kinds of things that are a disadvantage. If you stand at a traffic light and it goes to green, you can count 3 seconds for first person to move, 3 more seconds for the second person to move, and so on. If you're number 7 in the line, you probably won't make it through the light. Whereas autonomous modules, when the signal changes, and it may be lights or it may not, that whole stick of 10 or 15 autonomous modules will go through the light at the same time. So we will get far more throughput from the present system. And I will tell you, I won't be around to see it because it's going to be 30 or 35 years, but I will guarantee the privately owned automobile is going to go away.
Спасибо большое. Вадим, если можно.
Thank you very much, Vadim. On the one hand, it's difficult to speak after the colleagues who have already mentioned all the possible consequences of transition to the autonomous vehicles. Anyway, I could add the following. Regarding safety, yes, the situation when the vehicles communicate between each other and determine the behavior of vehicles on the roads and streets is a good thing. But the safety system should provide for security against fraud as well. And this is the subject that we have not yet discussed, because if someone can break into a server or a computer with bad intentions, he can organize a car accident that would be quite serious. And these are very serious challenges that we are facing. Second, I think that the number of vehicles that can be found in the capital will significantly decrease by several orders of magnitude. Time will pass and mentality will change. It will be not about owning a luxury car, but it will be about getting from point A to point B safely and quickly, with the possibility to work during the trip. The number of cars then will reduce by 20 or 50 times. It will also be better in terms of environmental friendliness. At the same time, the fleet will be operated constantly, so good maintenance will have to be provided. The environmental impact will be improved dramatically, including the air quality in Moscow. And I'm convinced that people who live in Moscow will give up their own cars. Thank you, Vadim. Olga? I will not repeat anything. I will say 2 things that were not mentioned. People are speaking about the transport arteries of the city. This is a literary notion, but actually today it will become a neural network of the city. When we're speaking about a city with automated vehicles, the city will turn into a neural city, into a human brain, and we will get much more out of that. We will enhance the safety of the city. The vehicle will be able to communicate to the government about the state of the road. And many other things. So the neural system can ensure not just transportation, but many other things. And the concept that will be adopted now will change the situation. It's hard to live in a city. You need to get to work. You have a lack of air. And people usually, if they live in a city, use the first opportunity to get to the suburbs to get some fresh air. And with the autonomous vehicles, you will get fresh air in the city, you will get safety, and you will also save time, which is precious, because time is the most precious resource that we have. Thank you, Olga. Thank you, dear colleagues, for your participation in our small session. And on behalf of the organizers, I ask to excuse us for the air conditioning malfunctioning.